We saw Ukraine attack the Zaporozhye, if that's how you say it, nuclear power plant recently. Is the Ukrainian-Russian war spiraling into the abyss, and are Ukraine trying to spark a nuclear conflict?
I don't think that an actual nuclear conflict is going to happen. I do think that it's getting dangerously close, and I think Ukraine is trying to push it as close as possible to the possibility of a catastrophic Chernobyl type event. When you're bombing, you're doing drone strikes on nuclear plants, you're getting really dangerously close to something bad happening. But I think ultimately it is about creating fear and creating leverage and creating more justification for sending funds to Ukraine from the West. You know, we have homeless people all over the place, addicted to all kinds of drugs here in the United States. And instead of helping them, we're sending money to Ukraine because they keep creating the delusion that that they're about to win, or that if they don't immediately win, that Putin is just going to light one of the nuclear plants on fire. So the propaganda war over the Zaporizhzhia power plant has been a great emblem of that. You know, not great, really bad emblem of that, because what we saw last week was just a giant fire coming out of it, and that's what Zelensky posted on his Twitter account. You know, most of his posts get 100,000, 200,000 impressions. That one got 5 million. It captured the imagination of the world because it played on the fears that we saw, you know, all the way back to Chernobyl. When you see a nuclear plant on fire in Ukraine, it's a little scary. So it got a lot of attention and recaptured people's imaginations. The problem is the propaganda war around it. Ukraine claimed that it was Russia just burning tires in the nuclear plant just to make people scared, and then Russia claimed that it was a drone strike on the plant. Now, if we look at the evidence of both claims, why would Russia be burning a fire in their nuclear plant when it sends this terrible signal to their own people that the war effort is out of control, that they can't keep their own nuclear plant safe, that you know, one of their biggest tools of diplomacy is nuclear plants. So sending out the message to the world that nuclear plants built by Russia are not safe just doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. What makes a lot more sense is the repeated history of Ukraine of sending these irresponsible drone strikes to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. There was just another one in the week since the supposed tire fire at Zaporizhzhia. It's confirmed by the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's a watchdog, you know, funded by the UN. They're supporting the narrative that it was a drone strike in both cases. So what we're seeing are just these increasingly irresponsible drone strike attacks. There's reports that Ukraine is landing shell attacks near the Kursk nuclear power plant in their Kursk offensive. Now, that nuclear plant, that's a Chernobyl-style reactor. That's an RBMK reactor. It's the old design from the 70s and 80s, which is less safe. I know they've fixed it up quite a bit since the Chernobyl incident. But basically what we're seeing is just this very increasingly dangerous game that Ukraine is playing to get more of our money sent to them instead of helping our own people.
Indeed, and as Johnny Dollar has mentioned in the chat, Ukraine has been the most prolific money laundering machine of the last 2 years, second to the COVID wealth transfer, he says, which is about right. Now, China has launched the world's first thorium nuclear reactor, while Germany has started to destroy its Grafenhainfeld nuclear power plant. Is the West shooting itself in the foot by not developing its nuclear energy programs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing about what's going on in the West is that there has been a revival of nuclear energy, not in Germany. But Germany, what we're seeing is the end result of 50 years of the old way of Western diplomacy and the old way of the West seeing the world as a unipolar world. So in Germany, what they're experiencing are kind of the last effects of the old way, which is the Green Party, Greenpeace, Gaia worshiping narrative that people from, for example, the World Economic Forum, from the Club of Rome, which issued the Limits to Growth report in the 70s. Their old way of seeing the world was that we'd be able to prevent the world from growing and to maintain the power structure of the world, preventing societies from higher and higher forms of energy. Higher and higher forms of energy allow us to bust through the supposed limits to growth, the supposed Malthusian limits, as Thomas Malthus once wrote about. So what Germany actually believed their own BS, and what they're doing is actually playing out what they literally said. They're actually living up to their rhetoric, which on one hand I can respect. If you actually believe it, well, then go ahead, destroy your own nuclear plants. But what's happening now in the West, and this is playing out in Ukraine actually, is that what we're going to see is two competing versions of world development. So the West has accepted now, the G7, the Atlantic Council, all these people, they've accepted now that Russia and China are going to use nuclear power as a tool of diplomacy to help gain influence in Africa and South America and Asia. And that's what's happening. If you talk to someone in Africa, like a diplomat or something, they'll tell you that when someone from the West comes, like a diplomat, they'll get a lecture from them. But when someone from China or Russia comes, they get a nuclear plant, they get a nuclear program, they get the ability to develop so that they don't have to burn dung and starve to death. They actually get development. So what's happening now is that there's a massive movement in the West to start financing a nuclear program after 50 years of just mothballing it. We could have had amazing nuclear stuff developed for the last 50 years. Our energy bills could be really low. We could have amazing industry. We could have amazing automation, freeing us up to be creative and to do things that we're really passionate about. But instead, we've been in this kind of controlled demolition of the West. So right now, I think the West is actually going to punch the emergency glass, because we're seeing how much China and Russia are busting through these limits to growth with their own nuclear program.
Yeah.
So for now, right now, like Germany is playing out the string on this stuff, but the West is going to be doing it. Unfortunately, it is going to be primarily to power AI data centers that are going to be controlling us, and to power the military factories that they're going to use to go to war with Russia and China. So that's not good. I wish we had the nuclear plants, so that we could stay warm, so that we could build useful things. But it is going to be, we are rebuilding the nuclear program, but it is going to be a tool of control and domination and war.
Yeah. And there's a question from the chat there. Comes from Joel Allen, who's asked, why isn't the world looking at how Hungary use nuclear power with their well-built nuclear power stations from the 80s?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think Hungary used Russian technology. I'm not 100% certain about that. And I believe that is also a point of contention now in the EU. And this is another part of this Ukraine stuff, is that Ukraine is seeking admission into NATO. And one of the conditions of being admitted into NATO is cutting all ties with Russia, obviously. So there's a number of countries in NATO and in the EU that have previously collaborated with Russia to build nuclear plants to help their country, provide heating, to have power for industry. So Hungary is one of these countries where Orban is continuing to work with Russia to develop their nuclear program and to provide fuel for the nuclear program, because Russia has an amazing nuclear fuel program. In a logical world, we'd be working with Russia and China. They have incredibly advanced nuclear technology, and we'd all be able to benefit from it. But instead, we're locked into the zero-sum game where it's completely illogical. So yeah, that would make total sense to learn from Hungary. The lesson from Hungary is Russia, they can provide nuclear fuel. And even in America, Americans out there, if you were alive in the 90s and 2000s, 10% of your electricity came from Russia. It came from Russia melting down nuclear weapons. It was called the Megatons to Megawatts program. They were melting down their nuclear weapons to create incredibly cheap nuclear fuel, which was so cheap that the U.S. Totally totally shut down its own nuclear fuel program because Russia was providing all this cheap nuclear fuel to us. So it's been done before, we can do it again. It's just this brinksmanship, especially in Ukraine, is really setting things back quite a bit.